Welcome back to Property Playbook. We're your hosts, Elena Saradidis
and Erica Reddy-Choquette.
And today we have a special guest with us, Jonathan Hacohen with Cormans LLP. He is the chosen lawyer, and I would say our chosen lawyer.
Absolutely.
And today we're going to talk all things what happens when you cannot close.
It's a tough one, and it's starting to become, dare I say, more common because you're seeing people that have kind of gotten caught in this very quick shift and transition of the market. And so, they've bought, thought they had the runway that they needed to get their property sold. And now we're running into that crunch of, okay, property's not sold and bridge financing is not an option because you don't have a firm sale to a firm sale. And what do you do?
It's so funny, you bring to the subject. First of all, thank you ladies for having me back on, and I'd love to join you on the Property Playbook. And, having done this game of law for as long as I have, I've seen so many scenarios where people, why they're not closing, the reasoning why they're not closing. And, people tend to read what they see in the media and they're thinking this is what's happening to everybody, which it's not. But there are actually a million reasons why people don't actually close. But we're going to focus today squarely on somebody bought a property. They expected to sell their property. They bought first. They thought, okay, my property will sell for $1 gazillion. I have nothing to worry about. And here we are. And it's a month out. And like, I'm not even getting a showing. And I don't know if I can carry 2 properties. What am I going to do? That's Our scenario of the day.
That's our scenario.
We get quite a few of those, actually. You want the good news or the bad news?
I think we start good.
Good news is usually gets figured out one way or the other. So it does get done. That's the good news. The bad news is it may not be done the way you like it to be, meaning it may cost you some mucho dinero in order to make that happen. Whether you're going to go to the bank of mom and dad, whether you're going to have to look up other properties that you have, maybe you have a cottage property, you have invested property, and you can pull out some equity. There's usually ways in life that we got to do it. Otherwise, we start going down to the private lenders, and the private lenders are like, okay, no problem, 1%, 2% fee. I'm going to charge you this high amount of interest. You have to pay my broker also a percentage of it, and I'll give you 6 months to a year. And in that scenario, which a lot of people do end up taking because they'd rather not default on their transaction, I tell them, okay, you buy yourself, let's say 6 months to a year. We don't close then. Now what? There's no automatic right of renewal, and now you're going to have to try to deal with a new lender. So there's a lot of thought that goes into this process. And what I tell people is this. First and foremost, you get caught in this scenario, do not panic and do not leave it to the last minute. Mm-hmm. The second you have a hint that there's going to be an issue, you need to come to your lawyer immediately, and then we start working out the options. More options are available early in the game than later in the game. Can't tell you how many times people came to me, I'm 2 or 3 weeks out, and by the way, I'm doing my purchase. Can you act for me? Great, we open up a file. Oh, by the way, I'm going to have a sale too. It hasn't sold yet. Don't know if it's going to close because I haven't actually sold it yet, and I don't have a buyer, and I haven't had a showing for it. What do I do? And then we begin that fun process. Okay, well, we don't want to default in this. We're not going to actually close because we can't find the money for whatever reason. Now we got to come to our seller and say, seller, listen, we bought with good intentions here. We love your property. We want it to be our property. But circumstances come up. We need an extension. Can you work with us? That's when the real fun begins.
Mm-hmm. And I think I would probably say to your point on that, it's really important that you're thinking about this as early on as you can. Because I think what people don't think about is there's a lot of moving parts and pieces to getting, say, closing dates shifted. Let's say you're going to go back to the original seller that you purchased from and you're going to shift that closing date. The sooner you can make that happen, the better, because they've potentially bought something. Like the domino effect of these decisions and these changes aren't just you. It's you and then the seller and then maybe what the seller's bought and then maybe somebody else and then it's the bank and the blah, blah, blah. So the faster, sooner you can get the rainy day worst case situation ironed out, I think the better.
You could have a chain reaction of 10, 12 transactions where if transaction number 1 doesn't go, they're all going to domino break.
Exactly.
What I will say, though, coming back to it, we talked about the importance of having your lawyer involved and coming to them as soon as possible. Well, if they had come to the lawyer from the beginning before they bought or made a conditional lawyer review, we could have gone through some options. I'm seeing a clause now in purchase agreements that I have not seen in years. It's the clause, I bought your property. You acknowledge that I have a property to sell. I'm still trying to sell my property. So you can go ahead and keep listing the property for sale. And I'm going to try to sell my property. And if you get another offer in the meantime, I either have to firm up my deal or go away. But otherwise, once I sell my property, then we'll firm up this deal, all of us being equal.
So you're seeing more conditions on
Sold
sale
conditionally with an escape clause.
Yeah.
Make yourself an escape clause. Like, we know this was not going to happen 4 years ago, right? When properties are at the top, people are not even doing home inspections. No one's going to allow that kind of clause. Right now, when your property's sitting on the market for 2 months, 3 months, 4 months in some cases, yeah, you may very well accept this clause because you're saying, I know these people want to buy. They got to sell their home. Let's do it. Because otherwise, there is a breed of people that I know that they say, hey, I don't want to be caught in this scenario, so I'm going to beat everybody. I'm going to sell my property first. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep shopping for a property to buy. And then when that happens, worst case scenario, I put my stuff in storage. So instead of loading up a truck, I'm going to load it into a bin. The bin will get put in storage. So no difference for me, but I'm not caught in that scenario.
That's what we did.
That's absolutely the only way to do it. I'm sorry, I'm going to say it. I hate this topic. And I hate it because I think it's unresponsible for an agent to put you in a position, and like sometimes it's not us. Sometimes the client like really wants it. You've explained all the risks and it happened, but it's super irresponsible to have someone buy property, then turn around and be like, your property's not selling. You're firm on the other property, and now we're stuck in a situation that no one wants to be in. Someone's getting sued. Like, it's the worst thing in the world that could possibly happen is that happening. And you have to be specific in the market that you're shopping in. There was a time where everything was selling. And like, if you didn't buy it, you might have not had the opportunity to buy your dream home. And the market was running so quickly that you knew you were going to sell your house. That's not the case anymore. Like, let's make it very clear. It's not the case. Things are sitting longer. It doesn't matter what asset class you're in. It's taking more time, and it does not hurt you to have your property listed first, have your showings come through, at least see what kind of activity you're having before you're going shopping. Like, you don't go shopping before you know what's in your bank account. You do not go home shopping without knowing how much you have to spend. Like, I don't know how many times I have to repeat it or yell it from the mountaintops. Like, it's the most unresponsible thing to do.
Yeah. And I mean, listen, I think things have shifted because I think there was definitely a time where you were buying before you were selling because you knew unequivocally you could sell. You were never having this conversation, and you knew you could pretty much say without question you were going to get this amount, and you could have X amount more than that.
But that's knowing
But if I
without a
don't find a property right now, I'm going to sell and I'll have nothing to live in.
Yeah.
So I have to buy the property
For
first.
sure.
Otherwise, I'm going to be homeless because I may be looking for a year. But you ready to have your minds blown? Because I had this scenario come up yesterday. The one factor people don't think about the reverse. So we agree that fiscally responsible, everything else being equal, I want to sell first, have my money, then I can buy, and I have smooth sailings. Except for one little thing, our friend, the mortgage. And there's two parts of the mortgage which can screw you by doing that method. Number one, prepayment penalties. So you're locked into your mortgage. You did a 5-year mortgage, you got 3 years left. You got a good rate at the time. Getting that good rate also meant that if you break your mortgage early, they're not just charging you 3 months of interest, they can charge you something called interest rate difference. So you got 3 years left, the difference in the interest rates, and it could be colossal. It could be $20,000, $30,000 or more. So prepayment penalty, big issue. My client from the other day, they have the other issue. They're locked into an amazing, amazing rate, okay? They're paying like 1.8 or something, and they still got another 3.5 years to go. Their reasoning is this: I only have a certain amount of time that I can port my mortgage, meaning I can pick up my mortgage, put it on another property, but still, you still have to discharge the old mortgage, still register a new mortgage, fine with those costs, but they want to keep their rate. Well, the bank isn't going to let you keep that rate until the end of time. Most lenders only give you a 60 to 90 day window between the time you close one property to when you close the other property. So you want to avoid the penalty. You want to keep your rate. Now you're under the gun. So the big question is, I got to buy and sell with whichever one is first.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I have the solution.
Let's do it.
Okay, you mentioned the clause for when buyers are trying to buy the property, sold conditional with an escape clause. If you're a seller and you need extra time, you tell the other side that you need extra time. So you have a revolving door that we can mutually agree to extend closing based on us not finding a property on time. So like we can extend closing up to 3 rounds for X amount of days. Like, let's see how far we can push this.
And I think
So,
this
like,
is where the relationship is so important, agent and lawyers and everybody that's in the sandbox, because at the end of the day, if we're going to be trying to work with, okay, moving closings and moving targets and this happening and that happening. You need everybody in alignment that you can do that. Because the last thing you want to do is bank on the fact, okay, great, we can move this to December. And then you call them up and they're like, oh, sorry, September. And you're like,
well, you can also make it unilaterally. Like
100%.
the seller has the ability to move the closing date. If you have like the jewel of all crown properties and you're like, I'm going to be homeless and that's your deal breaker. Like I need this mortgage rate. You could be like, that's a condition on my offer. Like if you want to bring us an offer, that's all great. But if you don't have this clause where I can extend, then it's a no deal. So it's all part of the negotiation. We can negotiate again, which is a fantastic thing. Negotiate. And it's not just about negotiating price. It's negotiating every aspect of the purchase. Closing date, rent backs, like everything. We're seeing it all come back again. Use it. Use it to your advantage. We can use it now.
I've had buyers that said, I have to close by a certain date, so I have a late rate locked in. Otherwise, I'm losing this rate. Seller says, well, I'm not leaving this property for another 2 weeks because my price is not ready and I'm not going to go on an Airbnb, so too bad. And we've had the situation where the seller rents back the property or licenses the property, whatever you want to call it. So the only way this kind of arrangements ever work is having the right professionals in place from day one. And I'm not talking about day one when the deal is firm. I'm saying you're going to go buy a property, you're going to go sell a property, you have this idea in your mind. Get your lawyer, get your realtor, get your mortgage broker, map out every scenario, come up with a game plan, then go buy, then go sell, knowing your game plan and what's going to make financial sense for you. Because unfortunately, what happens in my scenario with a lot of clients, they've come to me when their deal is firm already. Then they realize a few weeks into it, oh no, I just spoke to my mortgage person and I'm going to be colossally screwed here because the numbers don't make sense. Can you just go change dates for me? Can you just go change that for me?
no.
Doesn't work like that. No.
This whole rent back thing works in your favor, not just for this, like what happens when you can't close and we have to figure out creative solutions. But I was just in a negotiation.
Probate, right? Like we talked about.
Probate. We were just in a negotiation last week where we were the winning offer because we offered to lease it back to the seller. So the seller's already purchased a property. They're retiring. They know exactly where they're going. They know exactly what day they're moving. And I'm like, how do we sweeten the deal for them? We know what our budget limitations are. So we sweetened it by offering them less money, but saying you can have the money before you have to move into the new property.
Right.
So you're guaranteed the money. It's more secure for you. Everything is great. We don't necessarily need to move in into a later date. So we'll lease it back to you for the additional month and you can move in slowly. Take your time. They're a little bit older. They loved the clause. They first were a little scared of it. The next morning they woke up and they were like, actually, this is phenomenal. I can stay here and move slowly. And all I have to do is give up a little bit on the price. So the buyers won, the sellers won, and this transaction went really smoothly. Like it helps, but people need to realize negotiating in this world is about working together with other people. It's not about who can screw over who. It's about how do we work together to make sure all sides are happy and we do what's best for our client.
Let's say cottages have been coming up nonstop and talking about the cottage market and how it's kind of softened and a lot of people now are taking advantage or thinking about it. But I've had clients that have come and said, look, I have a cottage and I've had this thing on the market for like a year and a half and the thing ain't selling. I got to get it off my books. And we start walking through some options and all of a sudden, wait a minute, I can act like a bank and I can give them back a mortgage. That can actually happen for me. Absolutely. Now there is a degree of risk obviously with that, but it's a creative way where the buyer may not be able to get that mortgage in that instant, but they'll actually have an easier time refinancing it in a year as an owner versus trying to buy it as a purchaser. For the seller, they got off their books. They got rid of the carrying cost of it. They may even be getting interest on it depending on how the arrangement, how long this mortgage is. But that's a creative way to sell a property when you need to get rid of it, you don't want any more, and the buyer doesn't have the means immediately, but it makes financial sense. But you have to have a really good mortgage broker and a lawyer in place for that. You gotta make sure the creditworthiness of the buyer, there's a lot that goes into it, obviously. But we do try to think outside the box. But this is where, again, we need to have a global big picture for those buyers and sellers out there, not just saying, I want this property and we'll figure it out later. There's no figuring it out later. We're gonna figure it out now so we don't have to think about it later.
It's not just that. Like when you're in a sticky situation and the deal can't close, the lawyer, the real estate agents, the mortgage brokers all need to be on the same page because it takes one person not cooperating to mess up the deal. And messing up the deal can cost the buyer or the seller thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars because they didn't work well together or someone dug their heels in.
So let's move that back for a second. I appreciate it because now you brought it back full circle. The other item on this deal, okay, I can't close my transaction. What am I going to do now? I bought one property. I'm stuck with the second property. I have seen so many different scenarios. I've seen scenarios where you come early enough to the seller and the seller may start cursing at you and saying, you know what? I don't even know based on your income if you're even worth it. Guess what? I'm going to just release you and take your deposit, go away. I know other people wanted this property. I'll just sell it to them instead. Maybe you work out a financial settlement, 10,000, 20,000, 40,000, whatever it is. And you keep this, let me out of the deal, go ahead, resell it. There's so many alternatives potentially depending, but you have to have parties that are willing to work with it. You have to have a buyer and seller that are ready, 2 realtors that are ready, 2 lawyers that are ready, and everybody's got to put their hats together and try to come to a compromise. Because these scenarios come up all the time. The worst case scenario that we don't want the seller saying, okay, you know what, deposit gets held, I'm going to go relist the property immediately because you're defaulting. You're saying you're not going to close. So now we're stuck and I'm going to go resell to somebody else and then I'll take you to court and sue you for damages later. That's the worst case scenario. That's the costly option for everybody in time, expense, and aggravation. I don't advocate for that whatsoever, but it does happen. Let's be honest. It is a scenario, certainly, but good luck. What happens if your buyer, guess what, is bankrupt? What if your buyer actually has no money? What if they put a corporation under the purchaser's name and there's nothing in that corporation? What if they move back to another country? There's so many things from a seller. Yeah, you might be able to take them to court and sue them and get rewarded in court, but you got to enforce that judgment. If there's no money behind it, it ain't worth it.
Yeah.
You missed one. What happens if they pass away? Have you gotten that on your desk yet?
Yes.
Like
Pass away between purchasing
day
and
before
closing.
closing.
Oh my.
Buyer has passed away. I've had one of the buyers passed away. I've had where the seller passed away. Go flip onto your RIA form near the end about successors, and you will see that the estate is still on the hook.
Yeah. Ooh.
Yeah, and
Not-
imagine having to wait for them to go through all of their probate to be able to ensure that the property can close. Like, it's the worst thing that can happen. And the shitty thing is, and this sounds bad, what happens if they already signed the mortgage commitment?
I had one where I had a buyer, and at the time, foreign buyers were allowed to buy, okay? And then they changed the rules, and now you have to meet a specific exemption. Fine. This person was in the process of relocating to Canada, got cancer, going through cancer treatments back in their country, came to the builder, said, builder, this is what's going on, being fully transparent. We need to delay by at least 6 months because they need the time to be able to get it here and get their stuff in order. And the builder came back and said, you're in default, and guess what? We're going to terminate the deal. We're going to sue you for damages. And I said, for real? Like, this is a person that just got a cancer diagnosis. We can show you the doctor's note. Are you really going to go through this with the media? Is that the look you want? And they ended up coming to a compromise. It still cost our client money. There's a human element to this outside of real estate where we got to step away and say, look, somebody passed away. Somebody is sick. We got to think about these things. I've had scenarios where somebody's in an accident, somebody passed away, and the other side's being aggressive, and the body's not even cold yet. Like, have some remorse, have some compassion. There are circumstances that happen.
Of course.
I wish more people would understand that and go beyond the dollars and cents of it and focus on the human element more.
Yeah, I think that's really important.
Oh my gosh. Okay, we got really deep. Okay, going, I think maybe we'll do like a little case study. Have you gone through this before? Like a client
Which?
not closing or something not happening?
Case study, I feel like I'm in
No,
grade 9
we've
business.
always been able to get them to close. We've always found the ability to get the,
Get the
other
funds or get
party-
something?
Yeah, something.
Look,
I've never
sometimes-
not had a deal close.
So sometimes things happen, and I'm going to tell a story time.
Okay.
Again, a lot of moving parts in every single transaction. Sometimes the sellers or the buyers or whoever don't choose to use Jonathan. Sometimes they don't choose to use the mortgage brokers that we've used time and time again, that we know can figure out creative solutions, can figure out how to make sure. I like how he's mouthing mortgage brokers' names. Use creative solutions to actually close the transaction. Like, what do? So I had a case recently where they used their bank to do the mortgage. The bank dropped the ball. The bank didn't send an appraiser to go into the property until 2 days before closing. They sent the appraiser on the Friday. Closing is supposed to happen on the Tuesday. The appraiser usually takes 24 hours, business days, to get it back to you. So we know we're going to get the appraiser on Monday. Now the lawyers, again, not lawyers that I typically use, said to the client that if they don't have the instructions by the Friday, they cannot close on the Tuesday. What do you mean you can't close on the Tuesday? You could fully close on the Tuesday. And I called Jonathan to verify we can close on the Tuesday.
Because most lenders tell you they need at least 48 hours advance notice to deposit the funds. You push hard enough, they will make the funds available at the branch closest to you the morning of, but you got to push for that. It doesn't just happen.
Okay, but let's say now you're in breach if you don't close.
Of course.
You've put hundreds of thousands as the deposit. It was not a little property. Hundreds of thousands into the deposit. The mortgage broker dropped the ball. And this was like, we had months for closing. They dropped the ball. Didn't send the appraiser in on time. The appraiser didn't appraise the property until too late. By the time the funds were available, it was past the date that we were supposed to close on. The lawyer now decides they are not going to close unless they actually have the letter way in advance. What do you do? Like, this actually happened. It happened recently. I called the mortgage broker. I was on top of them. I called the appraiser. I was on top of them. They made a mistake on the appraiser. I had to fix it. Like, I got reintegrated into the weeds to get this all sorted.
You're like a conductor in an orchestra. You get every instrument going together.
Then I was representing the buyer. The sellers decided they're going to let their lawyers take the reign, which is fine. At that stage, it is lawyer to lawyer usually. Like, they figure it out. They come to a compromise. They make a decision. The listing agent and I were cool as a cucumber. Me and him could work with each other, no problem. Everything is great. The moment the lawyers got involved, the deal went so sideways that there was no bringing it back until they calmed down. The seller's lawyer decided, because you're in breach of contract, we're going to make a demand letter on what we want in order to extend your closing. Which, by the way, we're going to close. There was never a question about when we're going to close. It's, we need an extra couple days to close because of this delay.
Just totally reasonable.
It's
in
reasonable
the grand scheme of what was happening.
Reasonable. And nothing is that crazy. The property is an estate. Like, it's an estate, but it's gone through probate. It's gone through everything. There's no mortgage on the property.
And they're not like they need the money to go buy another property the same day, because that can cause a bunch of headaches to sell. But if there's no other transaction,
nothing. It's just, we have this property. It's fully paid off. Seller's lawyer got involved. Seller's lawyer sent a very aggressive letter. The letter basically said we want an additional $1 million as a deposit, non-refundable deposit, paid today, or
that's obscene.
You're in breach. I think that too. Lost my mind. I told the agent, I'm like, he pre-warned me that there was going to be a demand and it was going to be aggressive. And I said, I recommend that we make this very reasonable, because if your lawyer digs in his heels, my lawyer will dig in their heels, and then we're going to have an issue. Let's just calm down and
But this
get it
is
done.
where I think this goes back to everybody just needs to work together. Everything can be resolved if everybody is willing to work together. And there, as you said, there are going to be the extremes where you need, a B lender or this lender or that or whatever. But like, you can always figure it out.
There's a big difference in my mind where we have the mortgage, everything is set up, the appraisal's done, we're simply now delayed by a day or two because of funding or whatever else, versus my mortgage fell through, my broker's disappeared, I need to go get a new mortgage now, I need a little more time. Those are two very different scenarios. But when I need a couple of days, all else being equal, $1,500 to the
100%.
seller, $1,000 to their lawyer for the time spent, fine, whatever. That seems to me reasonable. When somebody comes and says for a day or two, I'm going to charge you a $10,000 penalty and I want another $50,000 deposit, non-refundable. This is more the stance where, okay, there are people out there that they put an offer in, no intention of closing, it seems like, no sign of the mortgage. They're like, oh, can I get a $50,000 reduction and that will help me along? And no, you're not getting a free $50,000. So you want another month, 2 months to close? Then
that's aggressive. But I'm talking about 10 days. We needed an extension for 10 days.
Yeah.
That is it. We're like, we're closing. We're gonna close. Here's everything. Like, here's proof from the lender. You can call the mortgage broker. Like, we're good. Like, it's done. Lost their minds. Then the lawyer decided to look in the clause, and there was a clause that said we mutually agree to extend closing by X amount of days, but we'd have to mutually agree to extend. So the lawyer digs in his heels. Well, there's a mutual clause in it. So if there's mutual, then you basically agreed to it. So if we would have let you do it, then you should let us do it. And now there's like, I told them in the morning, that morning when I knew there was like, it's not working out.
yeah.
I literally said, guys, $3,000, let's solve the problem. $3,000.
Yeah,
I'm like,
exactly.
$3,000. Let's get the deal done.
Yeah.
Everyone's good in the hood.
$3,000 to get almost everything done in life.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No, but I fully said $3,000. Let's get it done.
Yeah.
In the morning, I said it before the lawyers decided to pull out their guns and start shooting at each other.
Yeah.
I literally said $3,000. Then they hit a stalemate where both lawyers were attacking each other. And I'm on all the email threads, both the seller and the buyer are on all the email threads. Imagine how aggressive this got. Then finally, one of the lawyers, the seller's lawyers, was like, I basically had enough. Let the agents get back involved. So then I get back involved and I call the other guy and I'm like, so do we get it done at $3,000? Like, is this it? The morning we had the problem solved. If everyone just like took a moment, step back. I'm like, your client, if they go list it today, how long is it going to take them to get the same number? My client's willing and able to close. It's just going to take us a couple extra days. You want to go through the process of listing it again? Does this make sense?
No, this
When
just
we're
goes back
ready
to
to
everybody,
sell?
please be reasonable.
But
Reasonable.
But
That's
this
it.
is where when
Yeah.
Al and I first met and we started
Yeah.
working together, one of the things we learned early on, she needs a clause done for an agreement. Most agents will say, go deal with the other lawyer.
Yeah.
But she knows better than that. And why did we do it our way? I would ghostwrite it for her. She would send it off to the other agent and it would get signed. If I send it off to the lawyer, I'm going to get back a whole bunch of
100%.
comments because they now need to justify their existence sometimes. And then I'll start marking it up and make a whole bunch of demands. And it's something that would take in 10 seconds.
It's a
now it's
ping
gonna
pong
take
match.
2-3 days.
Yeah.
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 And that's why we do that in life sometimes.
Yeah. So everything got solved, but it really comes down to everyone needs to work together. Because if the lawyers put down the guns and just work together, the deal would have been closed in the morning and there wouldn't be a need for everyone to have like a huge wrestling match in the middle of the transaction. Like the deal was going to close. It was done. It was done from 8 a.m. that morning when I recommended that.
But even relationships, when it comes down to it, what people don't realize in the underbelly of this, there are lawyers that have my cell phone. They'll call me at 4:30 on my cell and say, listen, what's going to get this done? We start talking on our cell phones together and we take something that could have taken 2 days and we figure it out in 5 minutes together because we have a good working relationship, because we know one another. I take care of you, you take care of me. We're all doing this in favor of our clients. There are such uber aggressive lawyers out there that I've had to call them and said, listen, it's not your house that you're selling. I'm not the one buying. Let's take the personality out of this. We're not attacking one another. Let's work together on a solution. But the way they come at me, you would think it's their home that they're selling and money's being taken out of their pocket. And this is the psychology of it. But getting too personal in it, that's not going to solve anything. So even for the listeners right now, when it's your home that you're buying or selling, I know you're invested in it. I know you want to get super aggressive about it. But do what makes business decision-wise, not personal. I'm going to get them at every single... No. We don't need to think that way. Do what makes a good business decision. What would you tell your best friend, your aunt, whoever to do? That's the advice you should give yourself.
Yeah. Just take a step back. You know, cooler heads will prevail. Just take a moment and figure it out. Because there's no point to go right in, guns blazing. Take a moment, figure out how to solve the problem. There's no need to point fingers. There's no need to do anything. How do we get to where we need to go? And work together on how to get there. And if you have the right team in play, the right mortgage broker, the right lawyer, the right whatever, the transaction goes a whole lot smoother. Because I can tell you for a fact, if I had Jonathan on it, it would have closed the same day. We would have figured it out. He would have made it happen. I know that. And I'm sure you know that. It would have happened. And if I had the certain individual mortgage brokers that I've used in the past on the file, he's name dropping again, on the file, then for sure it would have been done on time and for sure it would have closed. I know that for a fact. And it's because you know your team.
Yeah.
Like you have your team too. Like
I think
you
the
know
moral
when your
of
people
the
are in
story,
it.
and I think we've hammered this home: relationships, and communication.
If I
And
think the moral story of today's episode, we started off with something that could be negative, and the reality is you can turn negative in real estate very easily into a positive if you got the right people in place.
100%.
And sometimes it costs a little bit of money.
But $3,000 fixes most things in life.
Well, that's Property Playbook. If you like content like this, make sure to like, follow, and subscribe. Thank you so much for listening. Once again, it's Elena Saradidis.
And Erica Reddy-Choquette.
And we had fabulous Jonathan Hacohen with us today.